Welcome to the most opinionated space podcast on the internet.
Ad Astra, the podcast where we talk about the intersection between space, policy, and technology.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton.
I have a Master's of Public Policy degree with a concentration in Science and Space Policy.
And I'm a PhD in Computer Science and an all-around tech geek.
All right, so this is going to be the last episode that you are listening to of the Ad Astra podcast before we announce the winner of the t-shirt design contest that is currently running on the Ad Astra Facebook page.
You have one more chance to win.
Yeah, and honestly, it's really, you have until Monday next week because that's when we record. So hurry up and go vote for your favorite design. There's already, I think, close to 30 plus votes on the page or on the post already. So be sure to go there and share and encourage your friends to also vote for your favorite one. So yeah, next week on the 15th, we are announcing the winner of that contest, and the winner of the contest, the person who designed it, is going to come on for a special edition segment of the Ad Astra podcast. So be sure to do that, and then also leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or whatever podcatcher you're using right now to listen to us.
Absolutely. All right, now let's get into it. Starting in this episode, we'll start with latest from Washington, where we talk about the Commerce Committee vote on advancing Bridenstine for the NASA administrator position. Then we'll talk a little bit about how Science Committee Chairman Lamar Smith preparing to retire, and also get a little bit into the Air Force saying that they hopefully won't need Russian rockets for much longer. In Space News Highlight of the Week, we'll talk about a very special report recently released by the U.S. government on climate change, with some news that may shock you, given this administration's previous views. In international news, we'll talk about the Chinese version of GPS and some of their plans going forward. In latest in tech, we'll talk about NASA's progress with the Deep Space Gateway, as well as a new discovery on Enceladus. And then in Coming Soon to Space, we'll talk a little bit about Falcon Heavy and some events that are coming up in the DC area. Now, Jack, take it away. Latest from Washington.
All right. Thank you, Newton. Like you said, this week is going to be very interesting for space policy. So the NASA administrator nominee, Jim Bridenstine, currently the congressman from the 1st District of Oklahoma, is going up for his first vote. So as I mentioned last week, I went to the Hill, which was last Wednesday, the day that the last episode came out, to see the hearing firsthand and see what was going on. And as Jeff Faust wrote an article in Space News about it, but it was very on point that it was definitely a hearing that was kind of mired in the political rhetoric of today. So a lot of the Senate Republicans on the committee, all 14 of them, showed their support for Bridenstine. They didn't really throw too many tough questions at him, just asked him if he was going to support NASA and the mission of the organization and help us explore space. The Democratic side, 13 members, on the other hand, railed against him on his views on climate change, LGBT rights, civil rights. Basically, across the board, they attacked Bridenstine and linked it to how the job of the administrator is to be the leader and the person who sets examples within the agency. So this first vote is only just to get him out of committee and onto the full Senate. So this is the first of hopefully only 2 hurdles to get him into the spot of NASA administrator. And I'm at this point predicting that it's going to be a pretty party line 14-13 vote. He just needs a simple majority, 50% plus 1, to get him over the edge and into the full Senate, which as it stands, the Senate's 50-48. So that means that he doesn't have that much of a margin to work with. He has to appeal to all Republican senators, or at least win over some Democrats in order to move forward and into the 9th floor, the 8th floor of the building on E Street.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Bridenstine and the pick ad nauseum at this point. Once again, it's politics. It'll be good for the Democrats to challenge, another Trump pick. But at the end of the day, I still, I hope this guy gets in there, just because I don't want to see who who would be the next pick,
who the backup is.
Yeah.
But so this is something, maybe I just want to get this out just so that I can say I said it first. But I would say that Bridenstine is also the most vulnerable of the Trump nominees, not for any real policy reason. I think that Bridenstine, although I am a Democrat, I think that Bridenstine would make a great NASA administrator because of his interest in the issue and his willingness to be transparent about his views on space exploration. In the hearing, I mean, there were a couple canned responses that, you know, he's been practicing his response to the climate change question. He's been practicing his response to the LGBT questions, and I thought that they were all satisfactory, and especially the climate change, his response to the climate change question. If you haven't, definitely go watch the video of the hearing. But he basically came out and said that he's going to follow the science. If scientists tell him that climate change is being caused primarily by humans, that he's going to take that, and he will run with that and advocate on behalf of them to the rest of the administration and the agency. So I thought, on a policy front, I think he's as solid a nominee as we can get. What makes him vulnerable is the party that he's in. I think that with everything that's going around with the Trump administration right now, it makes all of the nominees very vulnerable, and especially as you see with the tax reform thing. Even though it's not really tax reform, it's just a tax cut for the wealthy.
Tell us how you really feel, Jack.
But with a number of Republican senators coming out and saying they don't support that, and a number of Republican senators, Collins, McCain, and Murkowski, also coming out and having not voted with the president and the rest of the party on healthcare, on budgetary items, on sort of a couple key administration objectives, that Bridenstine could very well be one. I think would be the first NASA administrator nominee to not get the position. There might have been one more that got through.
I don't have the background to know.
Yeah, I'll look into it, and if someone can correct me, great. But I would say that he's very vulnerable right now, so that's why he's trying to play his hand conservatively, pun intended. That he doesn't want to upset Democrats so much that some of them won't vote for him, but he doesn't want to look so, I guess, weak and trying to just win over votes that Republicans won't support him. Because I could very well see someone like Rand Paul of Kentucky, who is hard-line Republican, not vote for Bridenstine because of his willingness to work with Democrats, or his views on climate change. I could very well see that climate change could be the thing that puts him under in the Republican conference.
Right. And I know, and like I said, we have talked about this multiple times on previous episodes, just in terms of how it could be much worse. But I do understand the concerns about having someone who may be against LGBTQ rights and things like that being the head of an administration when it comes to hiring practices, when it comes to advancing people's careers. So I don't want to seem insensitive to that in particular. I just happen to think that if this guy does not end up with the nomination, then it would likely be much worse. I understand staving people off and what the Democrats' strategy is right now, but this might be the best that you have to go with. And I don't see, keep in mind, NASA's missions, NASA's endeavors span beyond administrations. He'll be able to make some changes, some of which actually will probably be pretty good, but once again, because he is focused on this organization. And he's been one of the congressmen who have not been scared to discuss space and talk about getting extra funding for space and doing, brave and bold missions. So,
and even on the earth science front, and when talking both earth science and out of Earth science, whatever that just anything that isn't Earth science. He has advocated in Congress and personally now as a nominee for more direction for the agency, as well as the missions that will carry us from being a monoplanetary. Is it monoplanetary or uniplanetary?
I would say probably it's monoplanetary.
Going from
I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah. So he's advocated for going from a monoplanetary species to one that's a monoplanetary species that has some cool research bases on the moon and Mars. And it was very evident in the hearing. Also, something that was interesting that he noted, and I think it was Brian Schatz from Hawaii, Democratic senator, that he made mention that Bridenstine supports making the position of NASA administrator a nonpartisan position, and that the term of service would be 5 years as opposed to currently it being 4, which I find that very interesting because that's not something that we often talk about when looking at executive agencies, but a number of other agencies do that. The FEC does that. The
FBI is 10 years, right?
CIA,
yeah, that's well
known. I think FEC and FCC is also.
God, how long is the FCC again?
I think 5 years. I can't remember.
Okay, all right. Survive 5 years. That's all you have to do.
but agencies do this to prevent partisan politics from injecting itself into the issues facing that administration or agency. And I think that would be a great idea for NASA because space policy has been nonpartisan or bipartisan, however you want to frame it, for basically as long as it's really existed. And in an era of hyper partisan tension, you don't want some of that to seep into an area that is so vital for the future capabilities of the nation and us as a species. Not to say, we need to go to Mars to survive as a species, but setting up the infrastructure for a vibrant space economy is going to be paramount in the coming century. So making something like space exploration partisan is probably going to hurt that, because if the Congress and the president aren't the same party, or even as we're seeing now, even if they are the same party, you're not really able to get much done. And the things that are tainted by partisan politics become worse somehow. You would think with more voices that it'd become a much more diverse conversation, but obviously that's not the case. So if space policy can remain nonpartisan, that would ensure that the future of NASA and other parts of the federal government that deal with space will not have to endure the partisan shellacking that some other areas like healthcare or the tax system or defense go under. I mean, even defense from time to time is a very partisan issue, and can be a very Democratic issue and can also be a very Republican issue. And I just don't want to see that happen to space because of how small it is, but how important it is in the grand scheme of things.
Oh, and by its nature, I think that's a bit difficult. But so moving on, tell us a little bit about Lamar Smith and some of his plans. So
Lamar Smith is the chairman of the House Science Committee. He is, I guess, kind of infamous in DC and especially in the science community, just for his views on climate change. He's the one that, when he became chairman, basically made it committee policy that climate change is not human cause, like even in the slightest. Like he will not budge on that one iota. And so he is stepping down after this term. So he won re-election last year, as members of Congress or members of the House do every 2 years. And he is not going to be seeking re-election. So he currently represents the 21st District of Texas, and I think he's been representing the 21st District ever since he was first elected in 1986, which is kind of strange because of the way redistricting works. Sometimes you get members, get different district numbers. If a state adds districts, and Texas since 1986 has added quite a few congressional districts. But so he originally from Texas, San Antonio, Texas born and bred, and has represented the 21st since 1986. According to his Wikipedia page, from 1988 to 2002, he did not win re-election with less than 72% of the vote. And even recently, the lowest he's gotten was about 59% of the vote, and that was last year. And mainly that is because in 2003, he got the University of Texas, which is in Austin, as part of his district, which tends to be a very... universities tend to be a pretty liberal place, but somehow he has survived. So, he's not necessarily a friend of the Earth science community, but when it comes to space, he has been a very vocal advocate for furthering U.S. space policy and has been on the forefront of saying that NASA needs better direction. He was one of the ones that I guess you could attribute to killing the ARM program, that he thought was not just a waste of taxpayer money, but a waste of the abilities of the space agency. So with him retiring, that leaves a pretty vocal seat in the House and the Senate. I mean,
there's still plenty that are there,
issues.
though. I mean, let's be honest. This is one seat that's gone. That's sort of that huge climate change denier pool, but folks like Senator Inhofe and other of that ilk are still very, very vocal. Yeah. And I don't know, to me, I don't really know how we go about getting this off of the biggest problem is that this is on a party's platform, right? Yeah. Like that this scientific issue is on a party's platform, and maybe some of the news that we'll be rereading coming up will help that, or maybe that's just wishful thinking. But I think once the party itself stops purporting to use that to state that is one of the items that represents them and is on their platform, that some of these folks will stop. We'll stop marketing that so intensely.
Yeah. But I guess, it's going to be very difficult to change the whole of the Republican Party. And I think in its present state, the party is not conducive to change of that magnitude. Yeah. Even though the Earth is conducive to change of that magnitude.
The problem is it just should have never been a partisan issue in the first place.
I mean,
it should have never been.
It wasn't until Newt Gingrich in 1994 with his Vision for America or Contract with America, whatever the frick it was, completely ruined the discussion on anthropogenic climate change. Yeah. I have,
and as much good as he was trying to do, Al Gore probably did a lot of damage here too. He did a lot of informing, but he also did a lot of damage here trying to do that. He didn't try to make it a partisan issue, but it being him made it a partisan issue. Yeah, unfortunately.
I think with his weight, when he put his weight behind it, that's when it exacerbated an already pretty contentious issue. Yeah, I mean, in 1994, even 1994 through to the first or the second Bush administration, that climate change wasn't that partisan, but it was still kind of partisan at that point. And then Al Gore kind of tipped the scales. But for that reason, I have very little respect for Newt Gingrich.
Just for that reason?
just for one reason. And then he lost the rest of it when he said moon base in 2012.
Anyway, but that's as much time as I want to give to Newt Gingrich or Lamar Smith on this podcast.
So here's something that I was looking at. My last little thought on this is, so that leaves open the spot of chair of the House Science Committee, and assuming that in 2018 Republicans keep a majority in the House, they're going to have the opportunity to pick Lamar Smith's successor. And as it stands right now, it generally within committees, it's the highest ranking, the one with the most seniority of that party gets elected to become the chairman of the committee, unless they have other obligations, such as running for president or whatever, running for Senate, whatever they do. And looking at the list right now, some of the names that are really kind of popping out at me are Mo Brooks from Alabama, Bill Posey from Florida, and Brian Babin from Texas. So those all I would say are a very likely successor to Lamar Smith. But the one that I think is the scariest and might also be the most likely because of his seniority is Dana Rohrabacher, the Russia-loving, Putin-collaborating congressman from California. The one who also said that there were asked if there were any civilizations on Mars. So he could very well become the next chairman of the House Science Committee, assuming he wins re-election and decides not to retire, or, all the various things that congressmen go through when they're deciding on re-election.
All right. Give it up one time for gerrymandering, ladies and gentlemen. All right. On to the Air Force. What's happening with the Air Force in Russia?
This is just a really quick thing. So in the conversations about the future budget of the Air Force and their space programming, and with the NDAA still waiting to be voted on, the whole Space Corps thing really delayed it, that the Air Force is looking at the next generation of evolved expandable launch vehicles, EELVs, to utilize non-RD-180 rocket engines. So RD-180 is built by a Russian company. I think a company, or it's not the government of Russia doesn't build them. Maybe it does. I don't know. But so the RD-180s is what we've basically been using on all of our rockets since we stopped using the space shuttle. And even then, when we weren't launching things on the space shuttle, we were using RD-180 engines. It was part of the détente that happened after the Cold War, when we got Russia involved with the International Space Station and tried to bring them into the fold on space. So the Air Force is proposing so they put out a request for proposals on October 5th to replace the RD-180 by 2022. So that's going to be a massive undertaking because RD-180s have been part and parcel of the exploration of space since they were invented. I mean, they're really good engines. I think you can, Newton, if you want to talk to any about the specs about it, that'd be great. But the RD-180 replacing that, which there are proposals out there, the BE-4, which is being developed by Blue Origin, and then SpaceX has the Raptor engine, and then I think ULA is using the BE-4 on the Vulcan rocket, if I remember that correctly.
I mean, I'm not going to dive too deep into it for the interest of time, because we have other latest and tech stories. But it's obviously it's a chemical rocket, features a dual combustion chamber, a dual nozzle design, and it was actually used for the first stage of the U.S. Atlas V launch vehicle, which many of us remember. This is something, like you said, that we've been using for an extremely long time. This design, the Russians clearly had, since the early 1900s, a hand in rocketry, and we pulled a significant amount. We pulled a decent amount of our designs from them, as well as researching our own. But they had the background, they had the history, and physics works no matter what hat you put on as far as your nationality or country goes. So, it's interesting that it's good that we're working towards an improved version, improved technology when it comes to rocketry, and sort of getting off of this older paradigm. It works, it's reliable, but we do have to move away from it. And this is just an example of the Air Force embracing that. So good on them.
And then specifically, the RD-180 is used for the Atlas V rocket, which was launched by ULA.
That's what I said. Yeah.
So that's more or less the workhorse of the Air Force at this point, if not also for NASA. The Atlas V has launched some of, the most important space missions that we've ever had. If it's, too small for a Delta IV, you throw it on Atlas V. It's a lot cheaper, and has I think, 73 out of 74 successes.
Yeah. So. All right, moving on to our space news highlight of the week. So everybody was shocked last Friday
by what?
when 13 federal agencies unveiled an exhaustive report an exhaustive scientific report that stated that humans, get this, crazy talk, are the dominant cause of the global temperature rise that has created the warmest period in the history of civilization. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know where they're getting this crazy science from. But yeah, 13 agencies, I wouldn't say in defiance of the Trump administration. The Trump administration approved the report, and I'm assuming that they knew what they were approving at the time, because I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. You don't hear the sarcasm in my voice, I'm assuming.
No, we can't hear it, but I sure can feel it. It's emanating from the computer screen right now. Yeah.
So they approved this report that declared that roughly 90% of climate change is caused by human activity, most notably the production of carbon dioxide by the burning of fossil fuels. This thing's called the Climate Science Special Report. You can just Google it online. It has its own website, as well as you can look up, whenever that gets taken down, you can look up the copy of it on the New York Times website, because they downloaded a copy of it. But the report, it's long. It's a really interesting report. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but I've just read some excerpts from it, just kind of skimmed through it so far. But the report notes things like, one of the quotes that I pulled out was, "It is extremely likely that more than half of the global mean temperature since 1951 was caused by human influence on climate," with high confidence. That's how they're reporting the level of confidence of the models and the simulations that they've been running. But to continue the quote, "The likely contributions of natural forcing and internal variability to global temperature change over that period are minor." They directly call that out, with high confidence. "For the warming over the last century, there is no convincing alternative explanation supported by the extent of the observational evidence." Now, I don't know about you, but when I heard about this report being released and all of that, I assumed that it was something with sort of a few mentions, but this was very explicit. I mean, that language is no convincing alternative explanation. With high confidence that this was caused by human influence on climate. I mean, this language is littered all over that report. So I'm not quite sure what's going on here. But the official response from the rest of the White House that was given to the press by White House spokesperson Raj Shah was, quote, "The climate has changed and is always changing. As the Climate Science Special Report states, the magnitude of future climate change depends significantly on, quote, remaining uncertainty in the sensitivity of Earth's climate to greenhouse gas emissions. In the United States, energy-related carbon dioxide emissions have been declining, are expected to remain flat through 2040, and will also continue to decline as a share of world emissions." That's kind of the hope. That's why we were going to sign the Paris Accords and continue down that trend. But that was the response from the White House. I'm shocked and pleased though that they approved this, but they immediately started to sort of have this backlash against it. I don't read Trump's tweets, so I have no news to report to you about that. Mm-hmm. Instead, I'll just tell you more about the report itself.
You value your sanity.
Exactly. So the report clocks in at about 500 pages. So, but once again, it's a very interesting read if you really want to know about the basics behind this. And I mean, this is more of a government. It's a government report on the science, so it's not like it's not completely an academic paper. So it's a decent read for people who are just kind of familiar with the subject matter. Mm-hmm. You don't have to look up all the references, but you may have to look up a word here or there. But so far, it reads like a government document on climate change, on the results of science.
And if you have to look up a couple words, then you already learned something new. Come on.
Right.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. So this is volume 1 of 2 volumes of this thing called the National Climate Assessment, which mm-hmm. is it's a federally mandated program that's supposed to release something every, I think it's it doesn't ever specify how many years between NCAs, but after the NCA 3, which came out in 2014, they were aiming at completing NCA 4, which this document is volume 1 of, completing that by 2018. And since it's not 2018 yet, they are ahead of schedule.
And so these are required by law that was passed by the United States Congress back in 1990 to put out these climate assessments. Like you said, there's no regular intervals, so I'm not exactly sure how they judge when they should release these. But yeah, this is the 4th one, and it's one of the most interesting ones given the administration that's been in place. Maybe they're actually, call me crazy here, worried about optics and blocking reports.
Well, I mean, this is something that started under a Republican presidency back in 1990. The first one, the first National Climate Assessment came out in 2000. The next one came out in 2009. The previous one to this one, the NCA 3, came out in 2014, and this one's 2017. Maybe 2018 for the full report to come out. So I think it's safe to say that this is a recurring enough document that they're not seeing it as an Obama program, seeing as how Obama was only around for one of the reports to be being released to the whole of the federal government, with the 2009 report coming out. The full report came out to all of the agencies that worked on it in 2008. Prior to the Obama administration getting elected. So, it's as bipartisan a report in that presidents of both parties get the report during their tenure. I would not say this was
it's apartisan. This is an apartisan study on climate change. That's what this is.
I would say
I
would say the spin that's going to come out of this is going to be hyper partisan. I think it's going to be on the right. You're going to have people claiming that this is an Obama era program, even though it wasn't, or claiming that this is somehow related to the UN or the Paris Accord trying to take jobs away. And then on the left, you're going to see it as hey, climate change is real. Doy, come on, let's get ahead of this thing. Let's solve the problems. Let's change the world. And so I'm not excited for the hype that's going to be surrounding all the politics around here, but I am excited to read this report. If at the very least, I'm going to be reading the sections on sea level rise and anything that has really cool charts. So definitely check it out. Yeah, 500 pages. That's like 2 hours or something.
Yeah, that's nothing. I mean, the one thing the report definitely does do is point out our very bright future, these things that are called tipping points that that make global climate change more intense. It gives us examples, things like changes in El Nino and other major patterns in ocean currents, some of the sea level rise stuff that you talked about, loss of Arctic and Antarctic sheet ice, releases of greenhouse gases and methane that will eventually result in worse worse off weather patterns as a result. Things like permafrozen ground beginning to thaw and sites both wildfires in California and things like Superstorm Sandy becoming more commonplace. So look out for that.
Hey, what would you think about a Twitter account that tweeted out this whole report in snippets of 140 characters?
I'd be here for it if you just added at real Donald Trump the whole time.
You have to spend, those the 10. Well, if you're
I'd be here for automating that. That's just a script. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just throw this in there. I don't know what you're going to do with all the charts and everything when it references those. The
words are fine. The words here are fine. Yeah. Honestly. Yeah.
I guess you have to parse it for different things that might not make sense. What is this series of numbers and digits and random things in there? Oh, it's referencing some chart that didn't format properly.
But in all seriousness, we'll provide the link definitely take a read. It's not for folks who are, deeply mired in the science of climate change. It's for, if you were the casual, program manager in the government, this is the document for you. Okay. So that's who this document's written for.
And we're coming up on Thanksgiving. This will make great conversation with your uncle.
Sure. Yeah. And all right. Moving on to international news. We're going to get through this quickly because basically I have several topics that don't really have that much of a background. Well, one of them does. So we'll start with this. China plans to link 30 satellites to provide real-time geospatial information worldwide by 2020. So we're talking more about China's push to have space infrastructure and the like. So China has added 2 satellites to its homegrown global navigation and position network that seeks to reduce reliance on the U.S. Based GPS, the global positioning system here that's used for all your phones and whatnot. This is according to state media reported on Monday, November 6th, the day that we're recording this. The Baidu's 3 satellites were launched aboard a single Long March 3B rocket. We've talked about the Long March in previous episodes, from the Xishang Launch Center in Sichuan province on Sunday night. According to the Xinhua news agency, China plans to complete a network of more than 30 satellites to form their own global positioning system, a real-time geospatial information worldwide system, by the year 2020. The system started operating in mainland China in the year 2000 and then expanded to cover the Asia Pacific region in 2012. The Baidu 3 satellites represent an upgrade as they have greater accuracy and an enhanced ability to communicate with other satellite navigation systems, so things like GLONASS and the like. The network will eventually provide monitoring and safety information with the nation's multinational infrastructure mega project, the Belt and Road Initiative, which is designed to link China with Central Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. Have you heard of that before? The Belt and Road Initiative?
I have not.
Yeah. It's this sort of mega initiative that China has been pursuing. Trying to remember the year here. God, it must have been. It's a 21st century initiative.
Is it it's regional then, right? It's not. It's China and countries in East Asia.
Yeah.
So it's sort of their attempt at creating, maybe not so much to call it a union like a European Union, but it's a loose network of countries all utilizing the technology, right?
Well, it's actually an infrastructure investment in countries along the old Silk Road that linked it with Europe. So this is actually
going through Central Asia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly.
Got it.
So
I'm picturing it now.
Yeah, it was released. The notion was released back in 2013. Some people may refer to it as the Silk Road or the One Belt, One Road Initiative. But yeah, it was unveiled back in September and October 2013. And it's been promoted by both Asia and Europe. It was initially called One Belt and One Road. Here it is. But in mid-2016, the official English name was changed to the Belt and Road Initiative due to misinterpretations of the term one, because people thought it was just going to be one entire thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the idea is for them to generate these infrastructure networks for folks to communicate along and accelerate economic growth throughout the region. So this is sort of attached to that entire effort. This also includes maritime infrastructure capabilities as well. So just creating these simple routes to get to Asia, Europe, Africa for things like trade, as well as other business commerce that to go back and forth. But going back to Baidu, which coincidentally means Big Dipper in Chinese, it's going to join GPS, Russia's GLONASS, and the European Union's Galileo as satellite navigation systems with global coverage. And apparently India, France, and Japan are also developing regional systems for themselves. So that should be interesting. That's all that state-run media by China was able to give us on that. But we're looking forward to that and more news on the Belt and Road Initiative.
Great.
So moving on. So this one has to do with the Next Step program by NASA, the Next Space Technologies for Exploration Partnerships program, and our favorite topic, the Deep Space Gateway.
Oh yeah, the Deep Space Gateway.
Yes.
Coming back with a vengeance. Well, coming to fruition.
With is it a vengeance?
I don't know. Well, I guess it's trying to make up for everything that ISS wasn't. Maybe, kind of.
Well, damn. Well, so they're about where ISS was back in 1984, right at this point, with like 6 people working on it at Boeing. So NASA recently issued a $2.4 million in study contracts for companies to develop the power and propulsion module of the Deep Space Gateway. Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Orbital ATK, Sierra Nevada Space Systems, and Space Systems Loral. I think it's Loral.
Yeah.
They were the recipients of this contract and will submit proposals for a module that will provide the power, propulsion, and communications to the gateway and will launch on the EM2 launch of the SLS rocket. So these are study contracts. My guess is they're going to build up some prototypes, things like that. Some folks, and then get on a more condensed contract with one as prime, a couple of subs, and a couple kicked out.
Mm-hmm. As happens with government contracts.
Yeah, well, and just sort of the beginnings of these programs, so there's going to be someone who has a study that really is, it's very innovative and very feasible, and it's going to be the route the NEST's going to want to choose, and they're going to be in prime territory for a bid on a much larger contract. Note that we don't see SpaceX anywhere in there.
Well, SpaceX wasn't part of the original when Next Step was announced.
Right,
SpaceX wasn't involved. SpaceX has their own idea for like space stations.
Well, they're going to launch their own. They're going to launch their own Deep Space Gateway, right?
Yeah, exactly. In like what, 3 months?
Yeah.
That's what Elon said.
For folks who don't remember what we're talking about, the Deep Space Gateway is a crew tendered cislunar space station that's planned by NASA and Roscosmos. It was announced back in March of this year, for construction in the 2020s. I want to say it was April.
I think it was. Well, there was talk.
It was right when we started. It was like right when we started. There
was talk. I mean, because we've been talking about like what's next after ISS since ISS finished in 2010.
Yeah, but the official press release of the announcement that we are doing Deep Space Gateway specifically was back in April or May, I believe.
Well, no, it was Deep Space Gateway wasn't the term that they used until July. It wasn't until the summer that they started actually calling it the Deep Space Gateway. I mean, I think
like so long ago.
I think because they definitely didn't call it that at Humans to Mars.
Huh. I could have sworn we knew that it was being called that at Humans to Mars.
For us, we're in tune with the people that like work at NASA. So like they've probably been calling it that for a while, but it wasn't officially called that until towards the middle of the summer, if I remember correctly. And then really Deep Space Gateway wasn't mentioned as like a staple of US space policy until IAC, when that was literally what anybody at NASA was talking about was how everything deals with Deep Space Gateway.
Sure, but there were folks in the astrophysics in the aerospace engineering realm that worked for NASA that were discussing it at humans to Mars. I don't know if they used the word specifically, but they kept referencing the cislunar space station. So I think the idea was around at that point, but maybe it just wasn't as confirmed.
Well,
there's a very easy way for both of us to look this up.
I just looked it up, and yes. I will publicly admit on the podcast that I was wrong. They did call it the Deep Space Gateway in March of 2017.
I do remember that.
March 28th. And that was where they had the really cool picture with the Orion capsule docking.
I remember that. Yes.
With the DSG.
Yep. Okay. But anyway, for
tangent.
Now that we figured that out, the station, so the Deep Space Gateway would be used as a staging point. The whole idea is to use it as a staging point for a proposed deep space transport that would transport us beyond the moon. And NASA just used the words beyond the moon because they didn't want to say just to Mars. They want to use this thing and have it as a sustainable environment for doing travel to further planets and potentially in centuries from now, or a century from now, according to 100-Year Starship, another star. So it's also being considered by international partners for use as a staging ground for robotic and crewed lunar surface missions. Mm-hmm. So these latest studies that are going to be performed by Boeing Lockheed Orbital, Sierra Nevada Space, and Space Systems L'Oreal will help provide data on commercial capabilities as NASA defines objectives and requirements, as well as help reduce risk for a new powerful and efficient solar electric propulsion, or SEP, technology in deep space. NASA needs a 50 kilowatt SEP system, SEP, solar electric propulsion, which is 3 times more powerful than the capabilities available today for future human missions. So that's what these folks are going to be studying. It's a nice innovative contract. It's effectively seedling money for these folks, $2.4 million to study how to build a new engine with advanced solar electric propulsion is the goal. So best of luck to them. I have no idea what their actual proposals are, and no one else does until these companies decide to make press releases about each one of them. Or actually NASA does. In this case, NASA actually does this. I'm thinking of other spaces I used to work in.
Is there a deadline for these contracts or for these proposals for like the first round after they get their share of the 2.4 million?
It's a 4-month project. It's a 4-month study.
All right.
Yeah. This is seedling money. I mean, this is seedling money in any space. I mean, $2.4 million. So let's say they average, what are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of them. So they average about 400 to 500K each. That's about over the course of 4 months. That's roughly 3 or 4 full-time employees. I'm really getting into proposal math here.
I think
like doing a study.
That's more
No.
Well,
no,
I guess
not for engineers.
Yeah.
It's about 3 to 4.
I forgot the engineers are paid well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's about 3 to 4 people
per company.
Yeah, per company for a 4-month study. And yeah, basically they'll just come up with it's gonna be a lot of math, a lot of simulation. And they're just going to spec out design that can show that they can build these things. Mm-hmm. And the next phase will be them building these things. So
yeah, and
best of luck to them.
Designated for the EM2 launch, which is tentatively scheduled for 2023.
Right.
So I saw something the other day about how between EM1, which supposedly is launching in 2019, it's going to take them close to 3.5 or 4 years to not to refurbish the rocket or the capsule or anything, but to refurbish the mobile launch platform. Basically the thing that's going to take the rocket out to the launch pad, that big like crawler thing that we're all so familiar with from the space shuttle days. It's going to take them like 3 years to rebuild that thing after one SLS launch. So hopefully,
it's kind of badass. I wish I knew more about solar electric propulsion because I would totally hop on a contract.
Well, that's how I am with anything technical in space. Is it's like, man, I wish I didn't just know the policy stuff. Like, I wish I could just work on one of these big engineering projects or something. But
I could totally figure this out. That's literally how my mind works. I'm like, let me hop on.
Let's tinker with this.
All right, moving on because we're running low on time. So a sandy core may have kept Enceladus's ocean warm. They should have thought of a better title than that. And by they, I mean me. Because I wrote that. So Saturn's moon Enceladus has a warm ocean. That's one of the most promising places to look for extraterrestrial life. Now, it seems that ocean may stay warm thanks to a little quirk in the moon's core. According to a study that was published today, Monday, November 6, 2017, by Nature Astronomy by a team led by the University of Nantes. Nantes? I should probably find out where that's at. Do you know where this is, Jack?
I'm going to look it up as well. University.
Oh, it's in France. Huh, interesting. Cool. It's one of the nicest cities in France. Nantes. No, it's Nantes. I would say Nantes.
Nantes.
Yes, University of Nantes. Its core may actually be the reason that it's staying warm. Now, people had we'd been talking about sort of the vents underneath Enceladus, same thing as Europa, being what's keeping that ocean warm, and the core would, it leads to those vents, and so it's sort of giving more life, so to speak, to that theory. The scientists compiled various observations from the Cassini spacecraft. So this is once again more remnants of Cassini.
Cassini lives in our hearts.
It lives on, and computer simulations
and research.
Yes, and research. For those who haven't heard previous episodes, Cassini studied Saturn and its moons for 13 years before taking a dive into Saturn forever back in September. Back when it arrived in the Saturn system in 2004, the Cassini mission saw that Enceladus was shooting geysers out of its south pole hundreds of miles into space. And actually
contributing to the E-ring.
The E-ring, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Something.
See, I know science things sometimes.
So scientists knew that something had to be creating that liquid water below, and eventually there was a consensus that there is a large liquid ocean on Enceladus. So the team at the University of Nantes made computer simulations of water circulating through the spongy core using data from Cassini and geoengineering experiments with sand and gravel here on Earth. They found that depending on the core's makeup, that the ocean should get enough heat to stay liquid for tens of millions to billions of years based on that core. Specifically, they showed that more than 10 gigawatts of heat may be generated by tidal friction inside the unconsolidated rocky core. Water transport in the tidally heated permeable core results in hot narrow upwellings, which with temperatures exceeding 363 Kelvin, which characterized by powerful 1 to 5 gigawatt hotspots at the sea floor, particularly at the South Pole. The release of that heat in narrow regions favors intense interactions between water and rock, and the transport of hydrothermal products from the core to the plume sources. They were therefore able to explain the main global characteristics of Enceladus: the global ocean, strong dissipation, reduced ice shell thickness at the South Pole, and seafloor activity. They were able to sort of characterize each of these things, or at least show that these characteristics were there, and then predicted that endogenic activity that could be sustained for tens of millions to billions of years. So, to TLDR, they figured out that it probably has a core that's hot. Okay,
and that's really cool, because I went to that thing at the Air and Space Museum last Saturday, the Found in Space, and there was a whole talk after friend of the show David Grinspoon gave a talk on sort of the Anthropocene, the era of humans. There was a talk after him from an astronomer who looks at non-planetary bodies in the solar system, especially looking at the moons of Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune, and focused quite heavily on Enceladus and how we don't know, how there might be, we don't know what's underneath the ice shelf. We don't know if there even is liquid water there, but it definitely looks like there is, considering that there's those plumes, the geysers that contribute to the E-ring of Saturn. That like finally, I mean, just like what, 2 days later, there's already this like new news about how there might be an explanation, at least in part, for why there's liquid water on Enceladus.
Yeah. Oh,
science
cool.
is cool. I like science.
I wish I came to that presentation.
It was a lot of fun. The whole event was a lot of fun. Brightest Young Things put the whole thing on. They were sponsored by PBR, Sky Vodka, a couple other cool groups. But it was a lot of fun.
Lead with that next time, Jack. Anyway, the paper.
There was free booze there. It was great.
The paper, like I said, was published in Nature Astronomy today, November 6, 2017. It's called Powering Prolonged Hydrothermal Activity Inside Enceladus. So take a look when you get a chance. There's some really cool results there from simulations, and it's a really cool example of us doing some experiments here on Earth that aren't just computer simulation. Like I said, they had to do experiments with sand and rock to prove, this is how it would happen on Enceladus or near the core, and then compared that to the computer data and saw things matching up. So yeah, it's a cool experiment. So all right, on to coming soon in space.
Yeah, so the only two things that we got going on right now is I guess I'm gonna do them out of order in the way that we listed them on our document. So the first thing is Falcon Heavy. SpaceX announced last week that the target launch date for the first Falcon Heavy launch is going to be December 29th. And I think their window of opportunity is December 29th through the 31st. So they will be ringing in the new year, hopefully with the success of SpaceX's newest rocket, and hopefully with landing all three boosters. So there's hoping for that. We'll keep you updated if anything else comes up in regards to this rocket. I don't think that they have, and this is not the one that has the Air Force payload. That's going to be the second one, which also is going to be the payload that includes LightSail 2 from the Planetary Society. So that's
LightSail.
So I would wager to say that we're going to see the second launch of a Falcon Heavy in June of next year. I say give them 6 months to figure all the things out that went wrong, and build the new one and have it ready and raring to go for the Air Force satellite that's launching with them, as well as LightSail. The other thing that we got coming up is this is your last audible reminder, at least, to come on Saturday. That's this Saturday, November 11th, to the Nerd Nite DC Podfest Bonanza. So Newton and I are going to be hosting a talk called How to Be a Space Advocate, an Ad Astra Guide to Shooting for the Stars. We're also going to be joined by Doug Parsons and Mary Sakai, both hosts of their own podcasts. America Adapts for Doug, and Mary's is Accents on the Brain. So it should be a very interesting night. It's $10 to come see 3 really cool talks. And let me tell you, the space advocacy one, that's going to be the coolest one.
It's the bomb.
It's going to be... It is. So come pay the $10. It's doors open at 6. The show is at 6:30. It's at DC9, which for all those who go to Astronomy on Tap, it's the same place that it's going to be, on that second floor concert type area. They have great food and great drinks at DC9. So definitely make it out there and come support the show. So I guess if that's all that I got, Newton, is there anything you want to bring up?
Nope. That's it.
All right. Well, we're just clocking in under an hour. So yeah, absolutely go vote for the upcoming, actually next week.
That's the day before. We should have told them that last week.
What do you mean?
Oh, vote. Sorry, I'm thinking Virginia.
If you're listening to this and you voted in Virginia, good on you. And New Jersey too. If you voted in New Jersey, good on you. I think Kentucky has elections tomorrow.
Good for you for being an American citizen. And if you're listening to this and you live in those places and you didn't vote,
I don't want to hear any of you complain about anything ever again.
what I want you to do is write your name on our Facebook wall, and you will be officially on notice. And we will remind you next time that there is an election in your state.
we're fast becoming an electoral podcast. I can
yes.
tell. But yeah, so that's everything. And then vote for your favorite t-shirt design on the @Astra Facebook page. Next week we are announcing the winner, and come to Nerd Nite on Saturday. So
also like us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Also follow the other shows on the Elemental FM network, including the Straight Up podcast, where we read you audiobook readings of source material, as well as the Reminiscent podcast, where Tom Kelly, super producer of this podcast, reminisces with friends from his hometown.
I was wondering if you were going to make the pun, because if you didn't, I absolutely was going to jump on that. But yeah, so we're hitting 1 hour right now. Anyway, as always, I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton at Astra.